Hello, historians. I told you all I was going to be recording the class, and since I hate lecturing to an empty room because it's the saddest thing I've ever done, I've asked my mom. So if I accidentally in the lecture say, "Hey, Mom," you'll know why. So this is Rita. She's going to be sitting in as class student today. Okay, so today's topic is Reconstruction and the South. Sorry about the background noise. COVID's made some interesting work situations. So as soon as I figure out how to advance the screen, I will. There we go. So the aftermath of the war. So this is a picture of Richmond, Virginia, right after the Union troops took Richmond. It was a total war. The Union generals thought that the best way to end this war fast would just be to be as completely destructive as possible. So as they were, you've heard the song, "As they went marching through Georgia." Well, this was the Union troops were taking everything they could from the farms, of course, and also destroying the roads, destroying the railroads. So once they've used the railroads as far as they were going to, they started actually taking the metal of the railroad tracks and twisting it all up, making pretzels out of the steel so the Confederates couldn't use it anymore. And so this is after they took Richmond. And I just want to show you, if you look at this really closely, you could see the destroyed buildings. But why is there two pictures here? Mommy, do you know?
One's
What?
lighter than the other. The one on the maybe it's redone.
No, it's the same picture taken at the exact same time by the exact same camera. But there's a trick to this.
I don't know why one would be lighter.
Well, it's not the lightness that's there. If you look really closely, it's just slightly offset. There were two lenses, so they were just at slightly different angles from each other. And so these would be made into postcards.
Okay.
And they would stick them into something called a stereoscope. And it would be this, like, remember Viewmasters? Click, 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 click. It was like you hold it right here and you put the card in at the end here, and it was a 3D view of it. Yes. And they got these as 3D images. And they did it for all kinds of stuff. There was a good, like, 30, 40 years they were using this 3D image.
That's clever.
Not all of them were of battle scenes. Some of them were more burlesque because with the invention of photography came adult uses of photography because humans are consistent throughout time. But yeah, these stereoscope images were really popular. But anyway, the South was completely decimated. Their farms were destroyed. Plantation agriculture was completely gone. One, the stolen labor they used to work the land was gone. The people who had been working in industries that supported the farms had been gone for the war. There was just complete decimation of the economy of the South. And then what was happening is not only had the previously free labor lost all their work, now the people that had been enslaved that they had stole labor from, there were 3.5 million former slaves now competing in the job market. So just imagine how steep the job competition was. So many of the former slaves stayed in the general area that they had been born in, but many of them were now able to go try to find their lost wives or husbands or children that had been stole away from them. So there was a lot of movement as people were trying to find their families.
Goodness.
Yeah. But imagine now being able to go. So that was a beautiful thing. Okay. So when the Union generals went down, they would confiscate Confederate land. Oh, look, you're in rebellion. Your land is now forfeit. We're going to divide it among the people who were living there working the farms. So the Union generals started giving originally renting and then giving parcels of land to the emancipated slaves or new emancipated enslaved people. Unfortunately, after the war ended, the Confederates, the rebels, sued in the Supreme Court and sued in federal courts to get their land back. And in most cases, they won because the United States honors contract above almost everything else. Once contracts are in place, the ownership of land. So even though they had forfeited their rights because they were in rebellion against the nation, they were able to get their property back in most cases. But the Freedmen's Bureau was working to help the emancipated people get work, get land, try to make it now that they were being accorded rights that they had been denied before. Unfortunately, there was two competing notions of freedom going on here. One had been the enslaved people thinking freedom meant freedom to have jobs, to work and get paid for it, freedom to move around independently, freedom to just be themselves and not be interfered with. The former Confederates saw freedom as freedom to make their own policies as states, freedom from Northern interference, freedom from the Union dictating politics. So there was a couple of competing notions of freedom there. Obviously, one I agree with more than the other. Okay, let's see. So Lincoln was what we refer to as a conservative Republican. He thought, so when the war started, his plan was, I don't want slavery expanding into the federal territories. He said nothing about the South. He had no plans to emancipate any slaves. That wasn't his plan. He was just saying the federal territories should not have slavery. That's all. Because he didn't agree with slavery, but he wasn't like this radical that's like, we've got to change things now. The South didn't see it, and that's why they left the Union. That's why they seceded. So he was a conservative Republican. The radical Republicans were emancipation now. It doesn't matter what the South looks like. It doesn't matter what's going on. We demand emancipation. And then after the war, Lincoln was going to say, okay, South, you promised to never have slaves again because you lost the war. You promised to never take arms against our country. You can come back into the Union after y'all apologized. The radical Republicans, like, no, they have to pay for this war. They have to sign all these contracts that they're never going to screw up again. So the radical Republicans wanted to punish the South for their actions. You don't read the newspaper, but it's a lot like what's going on right now with the, okay, we should make peace, consolidate, come together, and no, they done insurrection, they need to be punished. So right now, the radical Democrats and the conservative Democrats are actually having the same conversation about the Republican Party and the insurrectionists and the politicians that were with the insurrectionists. It's the same argument going on. It's really interesting that the parallels are right there. I love this stuff. Okay. So the radical Republicans punished the South. Lincoln was like, no, they're going to apologize and they're going to come back into the Union. Unfortunately, John Wilkes Booth assassinated Lincoln. He had just been inaugurated a couple weeks after, actually about a month after his inauguration, give or take. Lincoln was assassinated. And so he was the leader of the conservatives. He brought all the Republicans together. And now without his leadership, the radical Republicans were free to make policy. And the reason they were really, really free is Lincoln picked Johnson as his vice president. Johnson was the only Congress member from the South who didn't walk out when the South seceded. He thought that the Confederates were just a bunch of spoiled rich people, that they weren't thinking of the average Southerner, and they had a bad plan. So he refused to leave when the South seceded. So Lincoln seeing, hey, there's a Southerner, we can make this Southerner be our friend and show the South we're ready to play game and work with them.
Yes.
Except 3 weeks into his term or so, Lincoln's dead, and this man,
Gets to be president?
who showed up drunk to Lincoln's inauguration, who was completely and utterly unfit to be president in any damn way, is now in the highest seat in the country.
Oh my goodness.
And we have 3.5 million freedmen, and he doesn't think that they're good enough to vote or have any rights because he's an absolute racist, having been brought up in the South with the slavery system in place. Crappiest person in the world to oversee Reconstruction. So yes, he wanted to punish the rich Southerners, but he hated the Republicans. So Congress kept making rules. They kept making laws like a Civil Rights Amendment. You remember the Civil Rights Amendment and how important it was in the 60s?
Yes.
There was one passed in the previous 60s, in the 1860s, and this man vetoed it.
Oh.
And every bit of legislation that the Congress was trying to pass, he was trying to veto. But because according to the rules of Reconstruction, until they ratified the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, they didn't have any members of Congress. And so the Republicans had more than a 3/4 majority, and every time he vetoed, they were able to override his vetoes.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
He wasn't happy.
Oh, no. He was so sad and depressed from all this that he was in the attic talking to the mice.
Oh.
He was a jerk, so we can't feel too sorry for him, but yeah, I know. So anyway,
Amazing.
it gets worse. So he and Congress despise each other, and they want him gone. They want another better president.
Okay.
So they impeach him.
Oh.
So they impeached the man for a law that they set in place knowing that he would break. So they made a law.
That's trickery.
I know.
That's not nice.
I know. So they made a law saying he couldn't fire any of his cabinet, which he had inherited from President Lincoln.
Yes.
So when he fired one of them, they impeached him. But it went through the House and it didn't go through the Senate. And so he actually remained in office for the remainder of the term. Needless to say, he didn't get a term of his own.
Oh.
So yeah, because Lincoln died, he was in office, the radical Republicans had free reign to do as much as they wanted. And here is the first one. This one happened while Lincoln was alive, and he had approval on this one. But I want you to listen to the exact words of this and see if anything's touchy about this.
Okay.
Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof a party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any of its territories. Important question. Is slavery illegal in the United States?
No.
Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof a party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or its territories. What does this law say? That slavery is still legal in the United States. There's people working to overturn this, but
that's been forever, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
there are some states in which prisoners only receive $1 a day for their labor. So is that slavery?
That is.
Especially since like Nicole has to pay 300. No, she has to pay $100 a year to see the doctor at the clinic.
Oh no, that shouldn't be. That
Yeah,
no, that's
so
wicked.
and if she couldn't work, they
She wouldn't
leave
pass.
they leave jail in debt. So if they have 20 years and they have a condition they have to keep seeing the doctor, they'll leave $2,000 in debt. Yeah.
Catch 22.
Oh yeah. So
That's wicked.
yeah, I wanted you to see the text of the 13th Amendment because we need to amend it. And there's been talk forever about amending it. But according to this, after slavery was completely legally ended in the United States for just that where your parent was a slave, the person is born a slave.
Mhm.
Well, according to this, no one's born a slave anymore. But if you're jaywalking, you can be convicted. If according to the black codes which were put in place, if you left your work without a signed permission slip, you could be arrested
Oh my.
and thus re-enslaved. If you went on break without permission, if the black code said you're not allowed to have go off site without permission, enslaved again. One of the states, I think it was Alabama, made more off rented convict labor to like build bridges and roads and stuff than they made in taxes from their citizens,
Mm,
like back in the 1920s, give or take. Oh, our Tamiami Trail was built with convict labor. So,
really?
yeah. So,
Mm.
yeah, there was like, so making sure that there was a lot more crimes that a person could be convicted for was really good for propping up that the southern economies and trying to reincorporate slavery without having it. So that's bad. So I told you about the black codes. The 14th Amendment actually is one of our most important amendments. Sorry to tell you the depressing stuff, but the 14th Amendment is one that's still with us constantly. All per all per, I can't speak. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction whereof are citizens of the United States and of the state in which they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive a person of life, liberty, property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdictions the equal protections of the law. This is still with us constantly. And so this was ratified in 1868. We didn't understand how important this law was until 40 years later, give or take. Like the country had this law, they worked with it, but the importance of it really and truly came into power when we started looking at liberties and how the Bill of Rights applies to the states. So, okay, first, an important thing, this says who is a citizen. So anyone born here or born of American parents, automatically a citizen. So that established our birthright citizenship. The second part is no state shall make a law breaking the privileges of any other state. And have you heard of a court case from the 60s, Loving versus Virginia?
No.
Loving versus Virginia is there was a man, Mr. and Mrs. Loving. They were an interracial couple that had been married for a long time, had 3 kids. I think it was 3 kids. It could have been 2. It could have been, I don't remember. I think it was 3. But they moved to Virginia. Bang, bang, bang. It's like 2 a.m. or something like that. They're asleep in their bed. The police come in and arrest them for being married while interracial.
Oh.
It wasn't a new thing. They had been married forever. No. And so it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, No state shall deprive a person of privileges or immunities given by another state. Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Loving don't belong in jail. So, good. And this also has been applied to now that gay marriage case, Abergefeld. Remember a few years back where gay men and women are allowed to get married now?
Yes.
Because I think Massachusetts, Vermont, and some other states allowed it. Same case. Sorry, other states allow it. Therefore, country's law.
Everybody has to approve it, whether they like it or not.
Yeah. So 14th Amendment, the 14th Amendment applies to a lot of states. Like if like the Bill of Rights says that you have to provide an attorney because since other states are providing an attorney and the Bill of Rights applies, now everybody that can't afford an attorney, even if they only break in state laws, gets an attorney. So this is a really important. Actually, I can't remember if that case was a 14th Amendment, but 14th Amendment is like most of the big Supreme Court cases. Okay, I'd say at least half of the big Supreme Court cases, 14th Amendment applies. So it's a really important one. It's still with us. And 15th Amendment is the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous servitude. This one, the southern states found ways around. Well, if your grandfather wasn't a voter here, you have to pass this test to prove that you can read. And then the test would be, one, persons who had been enslaved can't read because they were legally denied the ability to. And the tests were so vague that even a person literate might not pass it because like they put a comma in a different place and you could interpret the answer in different ways. So they purposely made this completely failable.
Like the new voting thing. You have to read it 2 or 3 times to understand what you're voting for.
No. Okay. Yes. Those are exceptionally annoying, but these were actually worse. At least you're allowed to vote whether you understand or not. They were just being denied the right to vote.
That's wicked.
Oh yeah, no. I know those laws. The state amendments are really hard to understand. You need a cheat sheet. Okay, so I told you Johnson was impeached. And this is a great political cartoon. It's the U.S. Constitution. Let me read to you this. It's hard to see.
Oh, he's under the book. Oh, that hurt.
This little boy who would persist in handling books above his capacity, and this was his disastrous result. He was just too small a man to deal with the Constitution.
Yes.
Sorry, I like this political cartoon.
I hope somebody helped him out from under there.
Yeah, Congress was trying to help him right out of the office of presidency.
Can I have his bones?
For anybody who's not in my regular classes listening to this, we're working in archaeology and Mom's helping me make a zooarchaeology collection for a college. Yeah, some random people might stumble on this that want to study history, so.
Oops. My error.
It's okay, I was just giving context because that sounded eerie.
That's Mom.
Yeah, okay. So these are when the black numbers are when these states were admitted to the Union. The later they came in, the first ones to come in only had to ratify the 13th Amendment to get back into the government. They came later. There was the 13th and 14th Amendments they had to sign. The last ones to come in had to ratify all 3 before they were allowed to have a seat at the table of government. And these red numbers are when the Union troops finally left that location. And why do you think the Union troops left? It wasn't because everything was settled after Reconstruction, that there was a decent amount of social equity, the African Americans could vote. That's not why we left, right?
No,
And guess why we left? Make a wild damn guess.
they were called back.
They were called back.
And what was the reason they were called back?
There had been a financial panic of economic recession in 1873, and people got sick of paying the money. It's like, that's the South. The South's its own problem. Let them handle it. We're sick of paying the taxes. Sounds like the Vietnam War. People got sick of paying the taxes on it. Same deal. That's not what I meant to do.
That was creative.
That was not what I meant to do. Okay. I'm about to show you actually a very racist image. So be prepared.
All right.
Okay. So I know this is a terrible image, and I'm only showing this to show what propaganda was going on at the time. So, do you think this is for the northern states, or the southerners were writing to themselves? Was this the North or the South that was creating this image?
The North had to have been doing that.
Why? It's hard to see. Let me zoom in.
Louisiana sacrificed on the altar of racism.
Radicalism.
Radicalism?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to see.
Yeah, I don't see a black person or the South doing this.
No. This is a pro-Confederate, pro-South propaganda piece saying that the North is the bad guys. So what's going on here is this is showing President Grant. Remember, Grant was the war general.
Okay.
After Johnson left office, Grant was voted in.
Okay.
So this is showing President Grant as making himself a king over the South.
Okay.
And it's showing the southern states as innocent virgins about to be sacrificed to radicalism, for the good of the banks that are going to just exploit them, take all their wealth. And this is showing the freedmen as just pawns of the North. See, the king has the devil on his shoulder helping him out.
Yes.
So you could see this
was made by the North.
No, this is made by the South, saying how bad the North is.
Okay, I'm not understanding that.
The South didn't want the Union troops occupying their land.
Well,
they wanted to be, well, yeah, but they had rebelled against the country. The North was trying to get them to stop being rebels, to accept that the freed people were no longer to be enslaved, and that these people now had the right to vote. And this was upsetting to the South, who had always seen them as property and not as humans.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on here is the South's griping that they should have home rule, and that the North was just acting like kings over them. So this is an this is just an anti-North piece. This is also an anti-North piece, that the carpetbaggers, like the people trying to make money from the South, are being supported by the U.S. troops breaking the back of the South. This is not what was happening. This is just the propaganda that they were giving, saying, yeah, no, we want the troops out. we want to be free to do what we want. And what they wanted to do was re-enslave the blacks and not let them vote. That's why the Northern troops were still there.
Oh.
But these were propaganda pieces, and the South was complaining about their most polite term was Negro rule, was the most polite term they used. But the numbers, actually, the 11th black senator since the Civil War, or since ever, the 11th black senator was just seated with the winning of the Georgia election. So in what, 150 years since the Civil War, there's only been 11 black senators. So they were, no, running for rule was not true. It was propaganda. So from 1869 to 1901, there were 2 black men in the Senate and a total of 20 in the U.S. House of Representatives. So any was too much for the South. There was, I don't have his name. There was this really one great story about a formerly enslaved person. He had actually escaped, stole a Confederate ship, took it up to the Union, but he was able to like get his entire family out. And then he became like a major player helping the Union, and then he became a political figure. He was a badass, but it's not this guy. His name is Smalls, and the man deserves his own movie, and I don't have a slide of him. But if they don't make a Smalls movie soon, I am going to be disappointed because he was awesome. Okay. So let's get back to the full slideshow from current slide. Okay. Black schools were being established by Northern teachers going down, starting schools. But since there had been no free public education for anyone in the South, there was also now poor whites being educated publicly for the first time too. So the North was bringing down free public education. Let's see. There was just one big problem is there was just painful poverty and sharecropping for whites and blacks, but it was really affecting the blacks the most, was that sharecropping is tenant labor. You would farm the land and you would have to pay most of it to the landowner for the right to work that land. And even for small farm owners, with the tenant system, there was not enough money in circulation. In the South, in the West, just money wasn't accessible. Everybody lived on credit. So what would happen is, imagine you want to grow an acre of corn. There's no cash. You go to the store, you get credit for, like, okay, I will pay you 30% of my yield for corn seed. So at the end of the year, 30% of your corn profit would go to pay back, and then you would have to borrow again for the next year. What happens if your corn crop dies that year?
You're in trouble.
You don't have the 30% to pay back, and you have to keep borrowing. What happens if your corn fails the second year, or there's too much rain that year?
Be in debt.
You're in debt, and what do you own for your mortgage? What's your collateral? You lose your farm. So where is, I have, there we go. See, so in 1880, this shows like the parts in red are 35 to 80% of the land is owned by someone else and it's sharecroppers living there. So most of the people are tenant farmers, not owning their land. Get back here. And this got even worse during the Great Depression. If you go out west with the Okies and everything, they lost their land because they didn't have like their land wasn't producing. They lost it to the banks. So there was even more of the rich people. They were able to weather it, and even fewer freeholders, independent farm owners after the Great Depression. So, yeah, kind of common. Oh, these are what are called cracker shacks. It's a specific type of architecture that brings cool air underneath the house and keeps it cool before air conditioning. Okay. So, yes, this abbreviated version. Grant wasn't a good president. He let his friends run the cabinet, and he let his friends do a lot, and he didn't oversee them, and a lot of them were taking bribes. And so he went down in history as a very, very bad president just because he couldn't control his friends. And yeah, there was a lot of corruption in that administration, tons of it. I told you in 1873, financial collapse, they call it panics back then. And so it made people really start questioning the soundness of having so many troops in the South. So the North got sick of paying it, and so the North left. And the former Confederate general, Nathan Bedford Forrest, decided he was going to fix the South. He called it the South was being redeemed, and he started the KKK. And they started more anti-voting rules, more black codes, meaning that, as I said, a black person it was illegal for a black person to quit their job without their boss's permission. It was illegal for them to leave their town without getting their boss's permission. They were trying to keep this in place, and without the North to oversee it, these laws started getting really rampant. Jim Crow laws were put into place. And then, do you remember? No, you don't really remember the Bush versus Gore case, do you? Where the popular election was, well, it wasn't that tight, but the Electoral College was really, really tight, and so it should have been thrown to Congress. So what happened is the Southern Democrat candidate and the Northern candidate were really close. It went to Congress. There was some backdoor dealing, and the compromise of 1877 is like, okay, the Republicans can have the president if you promise to pull out the troops out of the South, help us develop Southern infrastructure, and give us a member of the president's cabinet that's a Southerner. So that's when the South completely pulled out as a deal. So the South can get rid of the troops in exchange that the North gets the presidency. And so this is President Hayes making a deal with the devil, who was a party boss, so he could walk away with the South. Interesting stuff, huh?
Yes, it is. Wow. I wish I would have studied this when I was in school.
History is more fun when you're an adult.
Yeah, I think so.
It really is. So, but look how close they were in the electoral vote. There was only one vote difference. So that's why it went to Congress. This was very close. Okay. And so I have my class read about the different points of view of Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington was living in the South, in the middle of the Jim Crow laws, where if you said you wanted to vote, there was a good chance that the Klan could come and kill you. So his policy was keep your head down. Let's work on getting ourselves smart. Let's work our farms. Let's get ourselves prosperous. And then the Southern whites will be forced to accept us. And he had the ear. This is him with President Taft. This is him with Carnegie. And so he was popular because he was saying, you know what, we're not going to rock the boat. We're just going to fix ourselves. Du Bois, who lives in, I was going to say Massachusetts, that's where he was born. He was like the father of the Harlem Renaissance. He was living up in the North, and he's like, no, we got to have political action. We have to vote. We have to get the talented 10th, the best artists, the best musicians, the best writers, the best intellects to help lead and bring up the entire, all Blacks so that they're respected and get the vote and actually do make those waves. So they're both important leaders of this time in conversation, arguing with each other on what the right way is. But I think that one being in the middle of the South and one being in the North really affects the way they see what's going on. So I think that both of them had really strong, important points, but they were being informed by their environment. So I make my students write a comparison paper about them.
I like that.
I do too. Okay, I went over the 30 minutes. I'm going to stop recording.
But you got a lot more in there.
Yeah, I mean, and I have, I don't even want to show you those slides. Just of the scary bad ones. That things were not going well. After the North pulled out, things were not going well for Southern Blacks. It was a very dangerous place to be in the South. So, okay, where do I push the stop recording? There we go. So yeah, and then we'll come back and we'll do the West.